We, the world's people, want to survive. But more than that, we want a satisfactory life for all of us and for our descendants. To achieve that goal, we need a new kind of development, and we must learn to live differently. We depend on the resources of the earth to meet our basic and vital needs. If they are diminished or deteriorate, we risk that our needs and that of our descendants will go unmet. Because we have been failing to care for the earth properly and living unsustainably, that risk has become dangerously high. We are now gambling with the survival of civilization. We need not lose. We can eliminate the risk by ensuring that the benefits of development are distributed equitably, and by learning to care for the earth and live sustainably. By the mid-1970s, most of post-independent Africa was in turmoil. The human population faced civil wars, crop failures, droughts, and failed upliftment systems, causing abject poverty. At that point, there was suddenly a huge demand for ivory from the East. Prices soared. Millions of cash-strapped people turned to the reserves that had offered them nothing in the past. Reserve that seemed simply to be the playground of the rich and famous. Armed with the semi-automatic weapons of the Civil War, the fire of hunger in the belly, and the lucrative market beckoning, the inevitable occurred. Survival met the elephant head-on. In the 10 years between 1979 and 1989, the elephant population dropped from 1.3 million to 609,000 animals. Drastic measures were called for by the conservationists and other pressure groups. In East Africa, the military were used to patrol game reserves, and poachers were shot on sight. At the same time, a powerfully emotional campaign was launched in the West to ban and eliminate all trade in elephant products. This pressure culminated in the 1989 declaration by CITES, or the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora. A declaration that stated that elephants were an endangered species and that they were to be listed in their Appendix 1. This move effectively closed down the market for all elephant products. Poaching was dramatically reduced, but did not disappear altogether. The elephants became exotic, to be protected at all costs. The campaign was hailed worldwide as a resounding success, but did nothing for the hunger in the belly of Africa. The balance swung in the opposite direction. Man could suffer, but the elephant could not. And what about the land that was to be shared? How was the situation to manage or be managed? In South Africa and Zimbabwe, conservationists running national parks have always opted for an active management principle and program. Because reserves like the Kruger National Park are completely fenced in, the habitat is restricted and finite, and its carrying capacity is limited. To maintain the balance in this finiteness, annual culling operations are undertaken among a number of the larger mammals to keep their numbers within the carrying capacity of the area. Both South Africa, where the elephant population has increased from 120 animals in 1900 to almost 9,000 elephants currently, and Zimbabwe, with a growing population of some 60,000 elephants, have come under severe international criticism for culling. Interfering with nature, it is said, means that you are playing God. Certain conservationists in Africa, while indirectly acknowledging that an overpopulation of elephants can be highly problematic, have suggested the use of contraception to restrict breeding in elephant. One wonders in what way the use of contraceptives might not be seen to fall into the category of interfering with nature. Furthermore, why would one want to provide contraception for an endangered species? The option of translocation has been explored, where excess animals are moved to other game reserves. In South Africa, a large number of elephants have been translocated to existing as well as newly formed game reserves. But the crippling expense of the operation, coupled with a shortage of adequately fenced new ranges, precluded this occurring in large quantities. Chilling as it may seem, culling remains the only viable option of keeping elephants within the carrying capacity of a reserve, without crippling or completely destroying that reserve financially. The core issue is the determination of the natural carrying capacity of the land. The African elephant, like man, is extremely adaptable. Elephants are found in areas ranging from the forests of Central Africa to the semi-desert of Namibia. This is partly due to the fact that elephants can and do adapt their eating and dietary habits to suit their circumstances. This does not affect the quantity that they eat. Unlike most other mammals that are either grazers or browsers, elephants do both, eating mainly grass in some areas or at certain times of the year, and browsing on trees and shrubs at other times. The key here is habitat utilization. Furthermore, because of a reasonably inefficient digestive system, which is in itself a boon to other fauna and flora, an adult feeds for some 14 hours per day and will consume between 150 and 200 kilograms of food in that time. A breeding herd of 20 can comfortably consume 4 tons every day. To fulfill their needs, they will uproot grass and shrubs and break off branches. Elephant bulls will occasionally push down large trees. In this way, elephants can open up dense vegetation, making the land more accessible to grazers. Even broken off branches are not stripped completely, so that the leftovers provide food for others in the eco-chain. But elephants do at times also contribute to the death of trees by peeling off large sections of bark, leaving the wood exposed to insects and fire. Some of the trees are systematically ring-barked, leading to certain death. All these activities have a drastic effect on the elephant's habitat. Under normal circumstances, herds have enormous home ranges of several hundred square kilometers. The effects would then be spread evenly over these areas, often regulated by the availability of seasonal water. An adult needs to drink at least 100 liters of water per day. But water also plays a very important part in regulating the body temperatures of elephants. Consequently, drinking usually takes place in the middle of the day, when the sun is at its most fierce. Water is sprayed onto the bodies, and if enough water is available, the elephant will wallow and even submerge itself completely. This not only helps the animals cool off, but the mud and the dust sprayed onto their skins act as a barrier, protecting them against parasites. Because of the vital role water plays in their existence, elephants always need to be within a day's reach of water. However, once elephants are confined within a game reserve, their home ranges are fixed. Natural water holes and the habitat surrounding them can come under severe strain if they are used by too many herds. Watering points are often artificially created to allow herds to range over a wider area. But as the size of the elephant population increases, new herds are formed. These new herds are forced to share the same water holes and therefore the same habitat as the resident herds. Overutilization occurs, and permanent damage is done to the environment. If this is left unchecked, elephants will eventually destroy the habitat completely, leading inevitably to their own demise and that of every other species that shares their habitat with them. But elephants can live in harmony with a habitat on a reserve. An excellent example of this is to be found in Namibia's Etosha National Park. Etosha has a healthy elephant population. Poaching is minimal, and the elephants are in no immediate danger. Culling is not practiced here at present because nature itself maintains the habitat to elephant balance. Anthrax, a disease that reoccurs annually during the dry season, kills off substantial numbers of animals. Like the rest of Namibia, Etosha also is haunted by frequent droughts, which strain the limits of elephants and habitat alike. Despite this, the delicate balance is maintained. The habitat is utilized, but it shows no sign of permanent damage. The elephants eat constantly from the mopane trees, for example, but this has not destroyed the forestation. This is the situation within most of southern Africa's national parks. Here the elephants are well protected, poaching is minimal, and their numbers are increasing rapidly. In a good year, with the optimal habitat, elephants can breed at the rate of 5% per annum. This is almost twice the human rate. In the controlled environments of the parks, overpopulation is therefore a constant threat. It is clear that active management is imperative, but active management costs money, and money for nature conservation is in short supply in Africa. If South Africa and Zimbabwe were allowed only to use the vast stockpiles of elephant hides that they have, it would generate an annual income of some $1 million per country for nature conservation. But not all of Africa's elephants are protected within national parks. Thousands of them can still be found outside the relative safety of these reserves, so-called free-ranging herds. These animals can, on occasion, present one of the most beautiful and unique sights nature has to offer, the gathering of the clan. The herds have come together. There must be 60 or 80 or even 100 individual herds here. Bull herds and breeding herds intermingle freely. Each herd must have traveled vast distances to this gathering on the Kwando River. Southward from Zambia and Angola, perhaps, or northwards from Botswana. This is not their natural home range. The habitat shows no sign of overutilization and proves what has often been said: the African elephant is not an endangered species. There may be populations in the rest of Africa that are on the threshold of extinction, but in southern Africa, this is not the case. Here they mingle, share, rejoice, play, a moment of peace and tranquility. But civilization is not far behind, and they know what that means. They crash back into the bush. The miracle is over. It is now widely recognized that human population pressure is Africa's primary environmental problem. Millions of people in Africa survive on subsistence farming. In areas with poor soil, crops often fail after a season or two, and new fields have to be created. The cheapest way of achieving this is the slash and burn method, with disastrous results to the habitat and the wildlife. Realizing the extent of the problem, conservationists in southern Africa have created a massive drive to teach local communities the value of nature conservation. Ventures such as the Campfire Project in Zimbabwe, the Puros Project in Namibia, and Project Secure in the former Botswana have all been highly successful. In most of these cases, poaching has all but been eliminated, and any financial benefits have gone straight back to the communities. The success of these operations depends on one very important factor: the wise use of sustainable wildlife resources, or in other words, effective management techniques by humans. It comes down to the same thing. In today's world, the role of wildlife simply has to move away from merely providing an exotic example of our past to be viewed with awe and melancholy. Awe and melancholy do not fill stomachs or save elephants. The extent of poverty in Africa is difficult to fathom. An example from Western Caprivi illustrates the point. A hunting concession has been granted in the area near Popa Falls, and approximately 5 elephants are hunted here annually. Hunting for trophies is a method of receiving some financial benefit from the hard process of resource management, specifically following the ban on elephant products. Scattered settlements of the remnants of the Khoisan are to be found living here in conditions that result in the damnedest of poverty. They derive no direct financial benefit from these hunting safaris, but hunting parties are always welcomed with excitement. To these traditional hunters, killing an elephant is not an emotional experience. A dead elephant means food, a luxury that they cannot normally afford. Trophy hunters are only interested in the tusks, hide, and feet of the animal. The rest is given to the local inhabitants. Here in miniature, in microcosm, lies the depth, breadth, and width of Africa's problems. The soul-sapping unemployment, the bone-crushing poverty, the grinding, desperate search for methods of survival, and the elephant being torn limb from limb. My God, there must be a better way for all. The solution, many experts in the West are saying, is in tourism. Let the visitors bring in the money so desperately needed in Africa. The truth is, tourism is already a multi-million-dollar enterprise in Africa, bringing thousands of people to the reserves annually. The animals are viewed with wonderment, the marvels of nature reveled in. Here the tourist can shrug off the grime of city life and become one with his or her heritage. However, without adequate and at times harsh management, including culling, these reserves would crumble into wastelands, and the flood of tourists would vanish to a trickle. Well-managed reserves need vast amounts of money to be established and maintained, so that species can be reintroduced, people can be trained, and laws controlling our wildlife heritages can be promulgated and implemented. Game reserves create thousands of jobs, resulting in money flowing back to the communities. But this is only a fraction of the money that could be generated. Even now, the indigenous people living in the areas around these reserves do not benefit directly from tourism. But tourism can also have a negative effect on wildlife management. Botswana is blessed with what is supposedly one of the best wildlife reserves in the world, the Chobe National Park. With an almost non-existent infrastructure provided by the authorities, it has been left to private concession holders to establish upmarket lodges and camps. Thousands of visitors flock here over the years, most for one reason: to see the elephants. Chobe has thousands of them. Conservationists from neighboring countries have issued dire warnings of a threatening disaster. Unfortunately, these warnings have gone unheeded. Western governments warned Botswana that they would ban tourism to the country if any so-called active management of the elephants was undertaken. The elephants were left untouched. After all, these thousands were part of an endangered species. The tourists were content. The number of elephants increased dramatically, and there are now an estimated 65,000 in the Chobe Reserve, more than the total elephant population in Zimbabwe. The habitat is under severe pressure. The clearest indication of catastrophe looming is the disappearance of the riverine forest along the northern boundary of the reserve, the Chobe waterfront. Under normal conditions, a riverine forest should be lush and verdant. Trees should all but encompass the riverbank, and a continuous canopy should be home to a host of bird and animal species. In Chobe, this riverine forest is gone. Conservationists in Botswana attribute the vanishing tree line to a 100-year cycle of change. It is natural, and man must not interfere with nature, they say. It might very well be normal if man had not confined the elephant to the reserve. The so-called 100-year cycle that is now in its death throes in Chobe could be avoided if the herds could move on. They would have found new ranges and given the vegetation in the Chobe a chance to recover. But they cannot. Man wants the elephant confined. He wants the elephant to procreate. But he does not see that logically the habitat will be destroyed in the process. This logic confounds the imagination. Perhaps the only answer to this impasse is to see what actually happens, to watch one of the most horrendous solutions that nature provides to solve this problem. To witness an elephant population crash. Millions of people joined the campaign to have the elephant declared an endangered species, effectively stopping anyone from utilizing elephant products. Very few know what the true situation in Africa is, and even fewer have ever seen a population crash. And yet it happened, very recently, in Gonarezhou, the place of the elephant, and now the place of death. Situated in southeastern Zimbabwe, Gonarezhou, the reserve that should sustain 3,000 elephant under normal circumstances, but for the past 2 vicious, drought-ridden years attempted to sustain approximately 6,500, has died. The plant life is dead. Even the mighty and hardy baobab tree is stripped of life. The elephants, gaunt from hunger, desperately stumble in search of food, stagger and fall, never to rise. The place stinks of death, the stench permeating every corner of the reserve. There is still water, but no food. Gonarezhou is no more. It is a wasteland, a monument to the forces of nature, the march of progress, the greed of man, the emotions of humanity, the frailty of life. It is a terrible reminder of a population crash. Who is to blame? No one and everyone. Management, politics, survival, poverty, theory, money, emotionalism, nature, all have played their part. Local conservationists, in a desperate attempt to save as many elephant as possible, are doggedly capturing and translocating the strongest amongst the feeble. But their gritty determination is thwarted by failing funds and equipment that is primitive and strained. These men are trying to work a miracle. We all need resources. We're all part of nature. The elephant is a wondrous, paradoxical reminder of the fragility of life. We need to manage our life systems. Mistakes have been made in the past on the entire African continent. Southern African conservationists have learned from those mistakes. They must be allowed to benefit from their management. They must be allowed to use their elephant resources to the benefit of the entire ecosystem. Cruelty and kindness are inextricably linked in forming a place of the elephant, which is both ours and theirs.